because of restrictions, whether it's in school or after school sports or community sports, there isn't a lot of grace for kids with disability, right? To be part of, the soccer team or the basketball team or the volleyball team, right? And there's all these, considerations. Oh, are they going to get hurt? Are they going to hurt someone else? And, and a lot of, I think, just ignorance about, well, no, actually, these kids can all play together. There's no reason why, these kids can't play together.
Welcome to the Leave It Better podcast. Today we're joined by Lori Okimura, the president of World ParaVolley. It's an organization dedicated to developing and promoting paravolleyball globally. Lori's journey from athlete to sports administration leader is a testament to how sports can shape careers and lives beyond the playing court. Her work has been instrumental in advancing Paralympic sports and creating opportunities for athletes with disabilities worldwide. Lori, thanks for being on the show today. I'm so excited to share you with our listeners and for them to learn more about you and the kind of things you're doing within sport.
Oh, Janice, thanks for having me, and thanks for doing this podcast. It's a great, great platform for people to share about what they're doing these days.
Yeah. I have to say one thing before we get started. And, I've run into you a few times in my life. And I have to say, every time that I have, it's been such an amazing conversation, feeling that I leave there with. And I'm kind of thinking this might be one of your superpowers, that you're able to do that with people. It's about the feeling that I get in my heart about you every time. And if it happened to me in those times, I'm kind of guessing it may have happened to many other folks in your world.
Oh, you're too kind. It's good to know, because not everybody has that same reaction.
Okay. All right. I'm a special one there. Okay. Well, sounds good. Can you tell us about early experiences in sport and what initially drew you to athletics?
Sure.
And I've heard many of your stories here that are very moving.
Well, I'm really proud to have been born and raised in Hawaii. And there's lots of reasons for that, but one is that my grandmother actually was very athletic, although she didn't have a lot of opportunities that were formalized for her, or official, sports teams and such, growing up in the, well, she's from the Big Island of Hawaii, from Hilo, and she moved to Maui, which is where my whole family is from. And she was always very active, right? Whether it was like walking or picking mangoes out of the tree or guavas out of the tree. And it's, she was always very active. And I think we took for granted, when we were little, that was intentional, right? It was always her, I want to keep fit, I want to keep healthy, but also she just really liked to move, right? She just enjoyed moving around and being outside. And she was the one that taught me how to play volleyball. My mom taught me how to swim. So it was all these influences, from early on that were, I think, meant to be more recreational. Nobody in my family ever thought, she's going to be a professional swimmer or she's going to be an Olympic, this or that. It was really only, let's find something to do outside. We live in this wonderful place. Why not take advantage of it? So, for me, I look at it as I was sort of born and raised to be part of sports, right? And I'm really lucky that's the case. And then growing up, it was, I'm a big proponent of try every single sport that you possibly can, right? I mean, I think, why not? And B, it was my way to make friends. My family did move around a little bit. We moved to the mainland, to Northern California for a while. And it was hard to make friends, right? But the kind of tip or the trick, that someone told me early on is, well, if you can't make your friends in the classroom, try to make your friends on the playground, or on the sports field or in the volleyball court. And volleyball just happened to be the sport that that I gravitated to. My grandmother loved it. She had a group of friends that played until they were in their, late 80s. And when when we say play, it's like they would play wherever they could find a place to play. Like literally, 2 coconut trees and a rope tied between the two, on the grass, on the sand, on the lava rock, like wherever they could find a place to play. And it just became more of a social activity. And it was really interesting. Just a little side, like a side note. I think about my grandma all the time. I do a lot of business in Japan, more so in the latter years than maybe now. And I had this opportunity to meet this tremendous group of women from the Mama-san Volleyball Federation. Right. And there's a really beautiful Japanese name for it, but I unfortunately can't pronounce it. So, but Mama-san Volleyball. And I got connected to it through a friend from the Japan Volleyball Association. And he said, "Oh, Okimura-san, you live in Hawaii." And at the time I was living full time, in Hawaii. And, I have this company, and some people may be familiar with it, but it's like one of the largest convenience stores, in Japan, the Lawson Corporation. And they had this beautiful idea that they were going to sponsor Mama-san Volleyball, which was happening in every single prefecture. It was kind of like a weekly, maybe bi-weekly activity. And, it was so cool because on the one court, you saw the adult women playing volleyball. And then on the tiny little space next to it, you saw all their kids. Right. And so it was like this generational thing. But it always reminded me that, for years, Mama-san Volleyball was what I'm told, the largest charity nonprofit corporation run entirely by women in Japan. It was one of the first, and it remained one of the only for decades. There are rules, and the minimum age to enter the league, right? The friendly league is 25, but you have to be 35 if you played on the national team or played in the V League. And there's all these rules and regulations. And when I went there, gosh, it was in the mid 2000s. There were over 500 teams of women competing, right, from all over the country. And, there were hundreds of thousands of people that had filtered through, and so you think about it and you think, they always say women who are involved in sports, right, have a better likelihood of becoming involved in whether it's business or administration or management or other things. These women, and the president at the time, or the chairwoman at the time, was 92 years old, right? And she got right out there, and they modified the rules, right? They modified the rules. It was 9-on-9, slightly lower net, size 4 volleyball, a little bit smaller, touch blocking, no rotation, basically just a service order, really cool stuff, right? Very reminiscent of the Chinese 9-man volleyball.
Yeah, I was going to say.
But, for me, what the story represents is there are all these women that look like me, right? That were way more fit than I was at twice my age at the time, right? But it was a way for them to stay connected, a way for them to be social, right? A way for them to involve their families in what they were doing, whether it was the practices or the get-togethers during the week, or they would have these massive national tournaments, right? And what was so cool about that is you would see the dads and the kids in the stands cheering for the moms down on the court. Right. So cool, right? Women coaches, women refs, and men there helping them, guide them with any sort of facility help. And, hey, come to my city. I have a gym that's open. So it was really a good, sort of a good validation moment, because for me growing up, there were a lot of people to look to who were playing my sport, but there were not a lot that looked like me. Right. So that was always something to consider.
That's incredible. I love that story. And I think to me, volleyball is like the best game. Yeah. To me, it's always fun. I don't care how you play it. If it's a balloon over a coffee table in your living room, right. It's just right. You can find it. That's great. Thank you.
Well, it's a bridge builder too. I think our sport, it's one of the things that's so special about the sport. Exactly what you just mentioned. You can play it at any level, in any environment, on any surface, with anything that you can turn into a ball, right? But it's a bridge builder. It's a connector of people. Because if you think about it, as long as we've all been in this sport, if you can think about it, like some of the most interesting people you may have met are people that you met through volleyball. Right, such a diverse platform of people, right? Because not everybody you meet is a player, just a player, just a coach. No, they all have
No.
other walks of life that they're involved in, hobbies, areas of interest. And I think volleyball is one of the very few sports, that you can play until you're 92 years old. You can play at any level that you want, to participate in, and it's still fun, right? It's still a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's that would be high on my list is the word fun when I think about volleyball. So Lori, in our conversations, you shared a story with me about your playing career ended kind of early. What can you tell me about that time of transition from being a player and then maybe going more into behind the scenes things or other things besides out on the court? And I know there were a couple that you shared.
It's interesting. I think, when we say like, it is what it is, or, everything happens for a reason. It's like, well, yeah, it does, but you sort of have to find what that reason is. Right. And so when I was in high school, I was, just like every other high school kid, totally engrossed in my sport, right? And other sports as well. But really volleyball had become it, for me. And in my senior year of high school, I had a really debilitating back injury and became partially paralyzed for a period of time. This was in my senior year of high school, where I had to stay home from school, and I was getting all these treatments. And, I grew up as an 80s kid. So there was some, some information about rehabilitative, therapy, but really there was very little about injury prevention, which is the road that I ended up on, right? I could have done things to prevent my injury, but unfortunately, that wasn't known to me at the time. And, I just have to mention a really dear, sweet friend of mine who passed away a couple years ago, and his name was Gary Rikus. And I went to high school up in the Northern California Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area. And Gary, who was a Stanford alum, Stanford athlete, played football, had become injured, paralyzed. And really through that process that he went through, rehabilitated himself with this knowledge base that he created and all of these out of the box, methods and philosophies. And he created really a school, a charter school, a facility, and people call it different things, but I think it's like a beating heart, really. And it's called the Rikus Center for Human Enhancement. And Gary at the time was coaching football from a hospital bed, if you can believe it.
Wow.
And
Okay.
I reached out to him, and he was coaching at my high school. And I reached out to him because I had heard almost like a mythical creature, about this man. And he shared some things with me about his own pathway, his own story. The classic, not much information again being had. Gary in the 70s had sustained an injury that he tried to rehabilitate by, of course, well, if I do 10 of these repetitions, or if I'm told to do 10 repetitions over a, 1 day period, well, if I do 10 in an hour and I repeat that every hour, of course I'm going to get better faster, right? I mean, that was the, and you're smiling because, you're a coach, you've heard that,
right.
You've heard that before. And, his journey to health was all about not just discovering what made him better, but what made others better, right? And so he really helped me a lot. Mine was a lower back injury. Eventually, obviously, I regained my ability to walk in a straight line, and it could have been a lot worse than it was. But when I went off to college, I went to the University of Southern California and had the opportunity to work with the team because really, like, what would be the point of spending like 4 or 5 hours in the training room trying to get limber and get ready, and then to just practice for 2 hours, and then you'd be back in the training room patching yourself up? When do you go to class? When do you, when do you have a life, right? So luckily, I ended up being able to work with the team and kind of behind the scenes. And then by being exposed to the athletic department, I found a tremendous mentor and a gentleman named Tim Tessalone, who was the 43-year-long sports information director who just retired a couple of years ago, but at the University of Southern California in a major media market. I was a journalism and a business major, so for me it was paradise, right? And I switched over to doing an internship, in the behind the scenes sort of, area. And that's what piqued my interest with, how does everything get set up before the game? Like what happens? Like we don't just show up from the locker room and everything is here. And I had a chance to not only, get in on the media relations side, which was just a blessing. I use things that I learned from that experience to this day, right? That's how valuable, a learning experience that was. But really what it did was it allowed me to see from all these different angles, game management, promotion, marketing, finance, like the budget, right? Oh, why can't we take that charter? Oh, well, because we don't have money for a charter. Oh, okay. So we have to take the van instead, right? Everything.
Okay.
Like, serve and pass. Like who's got the keys, right? Why do we need to come for? Oh yeah, the visiting team probably wants to, familiarize in the arena. So, it was all these different perspectives that sometimes you don't necessarily think about right off the bat if you are on the field of play rather than being slightly behind it, right? Not spectator role. You marvel at everything that's going on out there, but really when it comes down to it, I was asking all these questions like, how do those results get in the paper, right? How does that, how does the gym get open, at 8 a.m. when the opposing team wants to come and, and do a workout or something? Like, who does that? Like, where do we eat when we're on the road? Really okay. Questions, but, this was all part of sort of like on the job training, right? Management training. And I loved it, right? I just loved it. I mean, what better way to learn than an environment that you're already comfortable in, that you can't really be a part of the same way that you were before, but you're still just a stone's throw from the action, right? And
curiosity, Lori, curiosity is so strong in that message.
And it just yes, I love that. You pay attention, right? And you look around you, there are people and places that you can go to for help, right? And there are opportunities that open up. And really, my whole career has been, kind of this cascading opportunity that comes from the previous opportunity, and so I just think I never look at anything being, there's pros and cons or bad and good, right? I think for all the sort of challenging times that there have been equal, if not more, really rewarding, opportunities and memories. And it's the people, right? It's the people that we meet along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Walk us through the journey to becoming the first woman president of the World ParaVolley. And I know you had lots of things coming through USA Volleyball and other aspects too that brought you this place. But could you walk us through that journey?
Sure. It's funny because when I speak with classes or lecture or something, I always start off with now, like I've had every job in my industry. And it's honest, like I've made the balls. I've sold the ball. I've played the sport. I coached. I ran a facility. I ran a club. I mean, I've had every single job. And no matter what industry that you're in, when you have that perspective, right? It's really good and it's healthy because it allows you to see things, but it also gives you a pretty finely tuned radar. Right? You can sort of tell when people are trying to, pull the wool over your eyes, or if, you can really kind of read the room a lot quicker, right? And it also, if there can be a downside to it, it does sort of give you a kind of a cynical, sometimes, sarcastic and very cynical look at things. Because I remember when I worked for Mikasa Sports for a long time, which I think is where you and I met at first when you were coaching.
It may have been, yes.
So thank you for your business. But I love that job because I love the person I worked for. Richard McCoy was the longtime president of Mikasa Sports in the United States. And if anybody knew him, like he was just one of the most enthusiastic, exciting people, right? And really just curious. You said curious before. Like I think my curiosity was certainly promoted a lot by his. and, working for a company like Mikasa, I got a lot of contact, with people in the volleyball community. Either they were customers or wanted to be sponsored by Mikasa or whatever. Well, but, talk about learning on the job. My boss, Dick McCoy, he sent me to Illinois. Right, because Illinois at the time was not, I think I look at Illinois now and I'm like, wow, what a hotbed, of volleyball, like, period, right? But at the time where I was going out there, I think high school ball in Illinois was kind of one of the bigger attractions. AAU was, had their championships in Illinois, and there was so much business that was going untapped in terms of the rising club business.
Sure. Big business.
Leah Wagner was a friend of his, and she was one of my first. She was the commissioner of the Great Lakes region of USA Volleyball, and just sort of a legend. And in my eyes, as far as like a really strong woman, and involved in sports and giving other women opportunities as well. But I went out to meet with Leah. My goal was, okay, he sent me out there for 2 weeks, and I was to just like an old fashioned salesperson, right? Roam the streets and roam the field and try to get some business drummed up. And the first person I met with was Leah. And thankfully, she also she took me under her wing and introduced me to a number of people, that she thought, okay, this is great. We have a new person, from this company. We haven't really done a lot of business with them before, but she seems to be a volleyball person, and, she hasn't passed out yet in my office, so we're going to give her a try. And she introduced me to a really amazing human being named Mike Hewlett. And Mike Hewlett had been a volleyball player, was a volleyball coach, had started a club, Adversity Volleyball, and at the time was dealing with diabetes and some other other illnesses. And Mike had, when I met him, by the time I had met him, he had already had a few amputations, from the side effects of his disease. And he was very deep into not only, promoting, but he was basically administering, like almost single-handedly, volleyball for the disabled, right? And it was, at the time, it was standing disabled volleyball for amputees. That was the, I think, the recognized international discipline, right? There was a games, Gutman Games, and then the Paralympic Games, and the standing volleyball was at the time the recognized discipline, and now it's sitting volleyball, ParaVolley. But Mike was tremendous, right? And he became just a really amazing source of volleyball. He was like a walking encyclopedia of volleyball, period. But when it came to volleyball for the disabled, boy, he was for me a real godsend, because he opened my eyes to a new type of volleyball, right? It wasn't new. It was new to me, but it certainly wasn't new, to him. But also he gave me a really good sort of like foundation, as to why it was so important, right, to offer opportunities like this in sport for people living with disability. And the fact that it wasn't meant to be exclusionary, like, oh, we have to put them to the side in the back of the gym, right? Which a lot of people would, right? They'd say, oh yeah, we have volleyball, something's going on with volleyball with people with no arms and legs in the back. And I just thought, wow, okay, well, I'm going to go back there first, right? And what was so interesting about it is, as my career started to take off, in terms of the sports products and everything else, we were able to see, some really great synergies, like the Colorado Crossroads tournament in Denver, which, is just an amazing event. They and their organizers started sponsoring the teams, right? The teams were not at the time the USA
I didn't know that.
team.
Yeah.
They were under the management of different governing bodies. Now USA Volleyball thankfully has stepped in, and they are administering, basically all volleyball in the United States, which is how it should be, and they've taken control of management, right? Budgets, finance, and management of the USA sitting teams, and they've had such an amazing result. But back then, it was Mike trying to raise money and trying to find places to play. The players lived all over the United States, as they do now, right? And they had to find these opportunities to bring them in and train them. And Colorado Crossroads provided that opportunity at the time, and this was like the late '90s, right, mid to late '90s.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Right.
Yeah.
And the organizers, it's a huge qualifier back then, for USA Volleyball. And the organizers, had a really, I think, forward-thinking, idea. And so they sponsored, it was typically like the men's and women's team. And then there might be like a foreign team, a visiting country that would come in. They would scrimmage, they would do training camps. And that was such a valuable experience. Right. And that was the first time that I was given the sense, it doesn't really take a lot to provide so much. Right. I mean, just a place to train. You think, oh, well, that's easy. Like there's gyms all over. Well, it's really not that easy. Right. When your athletes are all over the country, right. There's no formalized national team program. There wasn't one, at least at that time. And I think what's so interesting about that now looking forward is, that for me was not really how I started. There wasn't World ParaVolley back then. World ParaVolley was only been around as in name. Well, the sport has been around for decades, but in terms of the actual name of World ParaVolley, it's been since 2014. Long before that, it was, the World Organization of Volleyball for the Disabled and lots of other names and, and iterations. But in terms of looking forward now, Mike, I will totally credit for piquing my interest, right? In, okay, what more can we do, right? How can I give back? I was engrossed in a career with the FIVB on the beach volleyball world tour and, and doing lots of other things. I went through, sort of my whole career has been sort of a business track and a volunteer track, at the same time. And, it wasn't until decades later after I met Mike that I would come to be involved in World ParaVolley. And that definitely, I think, he had an impact on that, as did lots of other people. But he was the one who piqued my interest, on the possibility.
I think I just read a story. I remember seeing Mike at convention and just other places and qualifiers and things. And I just remember going, wow, this guy is just, he's got so much wonderful outlook on just making things happen with so many challenges that he was facing. What are some of the biggest challenges currently that para sports are facing?
Well, one thing that to me is so fascinating about, and I really had to learn, like, to be honest, like I didn't, even though I was a fan, of sitting volleyball, I was just a rookie when it came to all the possibilities that exist, in para sport. And one of the big challenges is competition, right? And when I say that, it's like actual tournaments and events and, places to play. Like every 4 years we have the Paralympics, or actually every 2 years, winter and, and summer. But then people forget, right, about all the, like we just had Paris 2024 and, sort of the excitement was at its highest high point. And then now people are sort of like, oh yeah, that's right. Wheelchair what? Murder ball this, wheelchair rugby, wheelchair football, sitting volleyball, para athletics. And so it was really interesting because when I got to USA Volleyball as a volunteer on the board, an old colleague of mine reached out. He had read an article that USA Volleyball had formalized its sort of governance, over parasport, right? Sitting volleyball in this case. His name was Barry Kuzner, and he was actually my predecessor at World ParaVolley. He was the president for 10 really strong years of the organization. And where we met was actually while he was working on the Sydney Olympics and Paralympics in 2000. He had this amazing career and then a second career. He was an educator and a professor. And then he had the second career in international sport, which was like even, more impressive than the first. But he reached out, and he offered this opportunity, hey, we want you to join our board, and this is the position that we'd like you to take. And at the time, I was still, pretty heavily invested in volunteering with USA Volleyball, and I felt like it might be kind of a conflict. So I said, hey, just give me a chance to finish. I've got a couple more years here, and just give me a chance to finish. And as soon as I'm done, I'm all yours, because I really would like to try something new. I had already retired from doing FIVB, and USA Volleyball, as rewarding an experience as that was also a really difficult one, for me. And so when the opportunity came up to join World ParaVolley, I started doing some research. Right. I started trying to kind of learn a little bit more about this world of adaptive parasport, inclusive sport. And in 2016, and in fact, I told Barry, I said, well, I can't join your board. I said, but, I do have some time. I can, and I would like to learn more about it. For me, like learning, you just have to just jump in and try to figure it all out.
Right.
And so I said, I would be willing to try to certify myself as a technical official, right? As a competition manager, right? Jury, they call it jury. And so I went, flew myself to a course in China, and the USA women happened to also be going. A lot of countries, were sending their teams because it was a qualifier for the Rio Paralympics. And it was fascinating to me. My first match that I did, in my training, like my practical training, was it was Egypt versus Iran. And there was no way in my lifetime, of volleyball would I have ever thought that a woman like myself would be able to, manage the competition for a match between Iran and Egypt, right? Especially since as president of USA Volleyball, I was excluded from participating in anything with Iran, right? Because I was female, right? So
right.
That was like the first eye opener. But in terms of challenges, right? One thing I think is a huge challenge, again, is the places to play, right? And the opportunities. One thing that struck me at that competition in 2016 was how some of the countries, they were obviously very familiar, with each other, the players and the coaches, and they were all embracing each other like, oh, it's been so long since I've seen you. And so I asked, how long had it been like between, the last competition that we played in was in like 2014 or something. I thought, wait, oh my gosh, you mean there's only,
right.
One competition every so often. Well, it's, sometimes we have more, but it's really hard to, find the places to play and to get the coverage and everything else. And again, this was 2016. That was not that long ago. And it was interesting. I think, again, the fates aligning. When we came back from that tournament, I ended up on the same flight as the women from the USA. And we were all destined to go to this clinic. This group had reached out from Los Angeles, and they wanted to have a, sitting volleyball clinic. I'm like, what's sitting volleyball? Oh my goodness. And, at this clinic, which was held at UCLA, the organization is called Angel City Sports, one that I'm very kind of endeared to. I met this tiny, and when I say tiny, he was just the tiniest little 11-year-old kid, and his name was Ezra Freck. And tiny 11-year-old Ezra Freck was the co-founder, with his amazing family of Angel City Sports. And what that organization did, is that they opened opportunities, right? It's really more of like a human resource, I think, than anything else. But they created opportunities for families to learn about adaptive sport, right? So if your child had a disability, and in this case, Ezra is an amputee, he's a lower limb amputee, and he also has limb difference in his upper limbs. As a child, his parents described him as he was just like, all boy, right? Just rambunctious and like jumping off of things and wanting to play. But, because of restrictions, whether it's in school or after school sports or community sports, there isn't a lot of grace for kids with disability, right? To be part of, the soccer team or the basketball team or the volleyball team, right? And there's all these, considerations. Oh, are they going to get hurt? Are they going to hurt someone else? And, and a lot of, I think, just ignorance about, well, no, actually, these kids can all play together, There's no reason why, these kids can't play together. And so Ezra and his family started this organization. And here I am pulling up with, some Olympians and a Paralympian or two. And we're coming to this, sitting volleyball. And obviously the team knew, more about what was going on than I did. But what is this sitting volleyball clinic? Like, who are these people? Right. And it was amazing. Right. There were kids in wheelchairs, and there were kids with limb difference and amputation, and kids with, slight visual impairment or some other type of physical impairment. And the parents, right? The parents who are just, I want anything that my child can be involved in. I will drive there. I will walk there. I will carry them on my back, and these parents were just having a moment. And so what was interesting to me is I listened to Ezra talk about, at 11 years old, like wanting to be a Paralympian, right? Barely being able to pronounce it, but then also talking about how important it was for kids like him to have a peer group, right? To have friends, to be able to participate in sport, and not just with other kids that have disability, but with their friends in the neighborhood. And that was always the problem, right? All the kids in the neighborhood, they run down, they play baseball in the open field, and then there's the one child in the wheelchair who can't access the field, right? Yeah. Or can't get there, right? So, Ezra, from someone who was so young, right, and such a
11.
Yeah. I mean, he really is just wise beyond his years. And I've kept everything that he has said, has resonated with me. He helped me start sitting volleyball program, in Los Angeles. And he's done a lot. He himself is in para athletics. So proud to say that a year ago, he set the world record in the high jump in his category. And
You're kidding.
And then he went to Paris. It was so exciting. And in his sort of like not best event that he does, he won his first gold medal. A couple nights later in his marquee event, he won his second gold medal. And now my young friend is following in my footsteps, I like to say. He's a freshman at the University of Southern California, the first athlete with a disability to be recruited to a Division I track and field program at USC.
Wow. Will you say his name one more time?
His name is Ezra Frech, Frech,
okay.
Right? Angel City Sports.
I wonder if I did.
He's,
I may have.
Yeah, if you haven't heard him speak or you might want to look him up, we talk about challenges. Like, he's somebody that has actually helped me by his example overcome some of the challenges, right? Where do you find the budget? How do you talk about disability? What are the right words to use? Right? How do you educate yourself before you go out there and have the experience so that you can really understand the impact, right? Not only on yourself, but on the other people around you. And so there are certainly, when it comes to the challenges of really understanding, what the world of parasport was all about, I credit Ezra. But, Janice, you and I both know there are other challenges as well, right? Especially for women in sport, in international sport in particular. There are things that I've come across, and it's mostly, during my time with USA Volleyball, I had some experiences where, my gender did play a role, right, in being able to do something or not being able to do something, right, or causing distraction, for the teams because, women are not allowed to do certain things in certain countries still, right, to this day. And it was interesting because, through World ParaVolley, I have gained some better understanding of some countries that I didn't have a lot of exposure with, before. And I've also, seen some of those same challenges. I had the great honor of presenting the little mascots at the Paralympic Games, the little red fridges, that everybody goes nuts over. And they're quite cute. I go nuts over them too, but I had the honor of being able to present the mascots and with some of my colleagues I did the gold medal team, which is such an honor. And obviously in the men, the Iranian team won the gold medal for a third time in a row. Happy to say that the USA women also won the gold medal for 3 times in a row. And there were just these amazing moments, right? But the one thing that sticks out in my head, and I know it shouldn't, but it does, is that, just before we were getting ready to go out and present the awards, And these people really know what they're doing. All right. The crew that does the games and the victory ceremonies and everything. I mean, they down to the number of little mascots and the medals and the shine and everything. They have it down, to a very, very rehearsed, tight, program. Except they kind of looked at me, and I'm not sure, I always figure that people know I'm a little bit outspoken, but they looked at me and they said, well, we have one change. Only one thing is different. And it's that you must not shake the hands. The gold medal mascot, you will simply present the mascot and not shake the hands. And I already knew that already right? And I think if this was probably 10 years ago, I would be a little bit more naive. But I already knew it was because Iran had won the gold medal, right? And these guys, they're tremendous. Like, to watch this team, it's really quite exciting and impressive and historic and, all the feels, as the kids say, right? But to me, I've gotten to know this team, and especially the players and the coach, pretty well over the last several years, since I started volunteering with World ParaVolley. And yet, I understood what the ask was, right? It was, it's, the award ceremony was being televised all over the world live. Right. And the cultural, implications being what they are, a female, they didn't know that it was, a lot of times I think some people mistake my name or me, maybe, I don't know, but they say, oh, like that must be a man if they're the president of this, or they're the chair of that.
Okay.
The head of USA Volleyball must certainly be a man, right? And that's not always the case, right? I think they were surprised when I showed up that, oh, wait, she's actually a woman. Well, so we have to make sure that she doesn't touch the athletes from Iran, because that would be a really, more than an awkward moment, but it would be a serious faux pas for them, as well as, on my side, it would cause them trouble, in their country. And so we, and I said, okay, just make sure. I said, I know why you're asking, and I'm perfectly fine, to adhere to that custom, but please make sure that they know why I'm not reaching out, to shake their hand, because this is unusual, right? Usually at our award ceremonies, they're not telecast live, so we can do a quick handshake or a, tap on the shoulder or something that won't offend, and that they're okay with, that they consent to. But this was really, it was really nerve-wracking, and you can kind of see that in the footage. I never saw the footage until just a couple weeks ago, and what I did think was funny, though, is after the cameras were off and after the lights went down, we had this fun moment behind the scenes outside the players' dress area. I got to shake everybody's hand, and a couple of them, gave a hug, and this is unusual, right? But this is what I'm talking about, like our sport in particular, right? Every type of volleyball, it's the connection, it's the sort of like, rising above whatever political message or cultural message or anything else. But you're not trying to insult anybody. You're not trying to get anybody in trouble, but you are sharing this moment in a sport that means a lot, right? Whether you're playing it, coaching it, like me on the sidelines, trying to make sure it thrives, and has a budget, and that we can open the doors another day. But it's that connection, right? It's that moment of connection.
Yeah. I'm so proud of the women's team, the third gold medal. I mean, it's pretty impressive. And some of those have been there for 3 gold medals.
7 Paralympics. I mean, it's a dynasty.
Yeah, I know.
When you think about the fact that for those women and the women from China, right, I think someone told me the statistic was the last 7 Paralympics, the winner and runner-up has been either the USA or China in the women. Right. And Iran, same thing. I think it was like 12 games that Iran had been in the final match for the men. But they make it look so easy, right? Even in volleyball and beach volleyball, like the athletes make it look like it's effortless, but really it's not. And when you see it,
it's challenging.
Yeah, when you see behind the scenes, it's just, fascinating.
I think maybe it was at the Colorado Crossroads where they may have given folks an opportunity to try, to play sitting volleyball. And it's so fast. It's so fun that I'm like, oh my God, this is so hard on top of everything. But, those kinds of things just help you to really relate or to understand a little bit more of how challenging that is to play. But it was a great game.
It's such a great sport. It's got amazing people. The country participation. I mean, you've got countries all over the world. Not that you don't in other, sports, but I think what's so neat about what I've discovered in sitting volleyball, especially with World ParaVolley, is that now we're introducing beach ParaVolley, which is 3-on-3 standing beach volleyball. And one of the other things I learned that's slightly different and unique to parasport is that it's very common to find athletes who from the different countries compete in multiple national team sports. So you think about, I think about, well, God, it's hard enough to make it to one national team level, but can you imagine like being a national team athlete in 2 or 3, like you have to choose which of your 2 or 3 national team sports you're going to represent in the Paralympics.
Impressive.
Maybe you can do a summer one and a winter one. And, you look at athletes like Candace Cable, who, medaled in winter and summer Paralympics and competed in Olympics. And it's like, oh my God, and she does this all from a wheelchair, right? With different modalities and mobility devices and different disciplines.
Yeah.
So it's, I find, if there can be a last chapter, right, or a final act, like I'm really glad to have happily stumbled across, this particular one. It was an area that I was already interested in as a fan, right, as an enthusiast. Mm-hmm. Even though I myself was not a Paralympian and not a sitting volleyball, national team or professional players, like I love it. I think it's great. What I love most about it is, I take again from Ezra. What I love most about it is when I see people trying, whether it's sitting volleyball or some other type of adaptive, parasport for the first time, and realizing that it's so inclusive. Like this is not sport just for people living with disabilities, right? It's sport for everyone. It just so happens that people living with disability, are competing at the Paralympic level and really breaking these barriers that are just, I mean, it's for all of us, right? I mean, they're setting this, this stage for all of us to come to the party and enjoy the music and, and everything else. It's just amazing. I love it. I absolutely love it.
So what advice would you give to young athletes facing transitions and adversity in their lives?
This is like my dream job. Like when I grow up, I want to have this transitional job, right? Because I've seen so many athletes. It started with people that were my friends, right? My classmates, my former teammates and everything. But I've seen so many athletes trying to make the transition, right? After the playing career has ended. Right. And you're never really done with sport, but maybe your active, high performance playing career is now coming to a close. And one thing that I would tell them is to not be afraid. Right. I mean, you're not afraid when you step onto the field of play. Why be afraid when you move into the professional realm, right? The private sector. And the second thing is that there are a lot of skills that translate, from the court, right, to the boardroom or the office or, whatever it is that you choose to do. It's just a matter of, recognizing the relevance, right? So now you're no longer competing for this trophy, you're competing for this bid or this piece of business or this, whatever it might be. I do tell them oftentimes, like, give yourself a break. Start with the things that you're not interested in, and just eliminate those right off the bat. Because there's no need.
Probably good advice, right?
To confuse yourself, right? Yeah. To think about the thing that you've always wanted to try, or you've always wanted to. It's almost like the same thing as getting somebody interested in playing a sport or even a recreational sport. Like, oh, what have you always wanted to try? Well, I really thought tennis was cool to watch. Okay, let's go. Let's get a racket. Let's get a ball. Let's check it out, right? And the other thing, one thing that I think athletes do particularly well, and they may not realize sometimes that they're doing this, but they communicate especially well. Right. And I always figured them to be, verbal and visual communicators, but for the large part, it's like trying to communicate with your teammates is the same in a lot of ways as trying to communicate with your coworkers or your colleagues or your customers, or, really it just comes down to explaining.
Great point. Yeah, right. I love that.
And that's something that, athletes have sort of a built-in kind of charisma or, ease, right? It's an ease of communication because you don't think anything of telling your teammate, like, okay, let's get the next one, or like move on, side out, next ball. You don't think anything of that, right? You shake it off, get to the next,
right.
Move on to the next thing, right? The goal is we got to get to that, 15th point in the fifth set. And, here we are at point 13. We're not done yet, right? So I guess really the tip, that I give out most often is don't be afraid to reach out. Use your life in sport, right? Your identity, your persona as an athlete. Use that to reach out to people and say, oh gosh, I really appreciated, when you came to that match and everything, but can I talk to you maybe, a little bit about, I'm looking for, this opportunity. I'm looking to transition into that. This is one of the areas that I swear it is my dream. If I could find a job doing that, I would quit everything else I'm doing and just do that. Because it always just surprises me how sometimes athletes count themselves short, right? They think, what do you mean I can't play anymore? Like, what am I going to do? I said, well, there's about 1,000 things that you can do with that degree that hopefully you got. And if not, well, there's the number one thing you can do. Go back and get your degree or go get some job training, right? Get some specific. If you don't want to finish college or you can't or, whatever, okay, I'm over that now, but let's go get some professional continuing education, right? If public speaking is your thing, whatever.
You mentioned also somewhere along the line just about volunteering, like getting the opportunity to get in there. And that's kind of on the job training.
Absolutely.
If you can get some of those chances.
I encourage that every single time for anybody, right? Because if you think about it, right, when you're volunteering, if you put your head in the right place about it, right? I mean, yes, you're giving back and there's going to be an impact, but also there's going to be benefit for you, right? Because a lot of times in these volunteer situations, you end up in positions that you would never, it would take you years in a company. Like I had this, it was sort of an internship, right? But I had this weekend I volunteered and I was in my early 20s, I think. And it was a national sales conference for a pretty well-known sporting goods company. And I learned a lot. I was only interning there for probably 9 months, just under a year, right? 9 to 10 months or so. And, I didn't know anything about the corporate structure, right? Like what is a sales meeting? What is a national sales meeting? Like, why is it so important? And here was this national sales meeting, like 100 plus salespeople from all over the world. The president, the CEO, all the C-level executives, and they were going to, the beginning of the week of meetings, they were going to have a little golf scramble out at this gorgeous course. And I'm not like a really avid golfer, but I really love golf. Like I love to watch it. I used to love to go to the driving range, and everything. But I don't know how to play. I didn't know how to play when I was in my early 20s, but I don't really know what I'm doing. And I ended up being in the what I term the wrong place at the right time. But there was one of the last scrambles to go out, and there were all these like really distinguished looking men and all fit and all these sales executives, and I didn't know what this particular group was, but there were only 3 guys there, and I did know enough about golf to know a scramble would be 4, right? And so they said that their 4th got held up, and could you just fill in? Yeah. Could you just, well, let's just, she can drive the cart and fill in until gets here. I'm like, oh no, I don't even think I had the right shoes on or anything. So I drove the cart for them, which is like nerve wracking enough, right? Cause you just know by the look of these guys that this is a really high level group of executives. I don't know who they are. Nobody's wearing a name tag, and I'm listening to the conversation and, I was always kind of told that, a lot of these deals happen on the golf course, right? And I knew what that meant, and I even knew the innuendo, but really, wow, these deals were going down in the golf cart behind me, oh my God, right? This is tremendous. Like, are you kidding me? They just shook on whether or not he could make that par and, and he would get the business or not get the business. Oh my God. And so we get about halfway through, we're almost to the 9th hole, right? And, I mean, it's pretty clear. Like, I'm not even swinging anymore. Like, I'm basically just driving the beverage cart at this point. And I probably, when we get to the ninth, we're almost into the back nine, and there's going to be a switch, and the beverage cart is there and everything else. And I say to one of the guys, I said, I'm really sorry. I have to apologize. I said, I don't know how to play golf. And he goes, oh yeah, we never would have guessed. I said, he goes, oh, well, what's your position, or who do you work for? I said, well, actually, I'm one of the interns. I said, I was putting together the goodie bags for your golf outing. And I was, I was organizing the spreadsheet, and, I'm actually one of the interns that works in the office, in the marketing office. And, this is even my sport, I'm with volleyball and blah, 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 blah. And so we started talking. Oh, my daughter is playing volleyball. See, again, it's the great connector, right?
Again.
Oh, my daughter plays volleyball. Right. Hey, and he yells over to the other guy. Hey, she's with volleyball, And so this company had, a different sport that they were, attached to, but they were just coming online, to, pay some attention to beach volleyball, which was where I came from. Right? Okay. I came from the pro tour, I came from, that world. I was just starting my job, my sort of work with the FIVB, and I was kind of hopping around, and then, we started talking about volleyball while they were getting their, drinks filled and everything else. And then they said, well, why don't you just, we'll just take you as a scratch, and why don't you just drive us around? Because they were just fascinated talking about volleyball. At the very end of our, our day, our morning, right, our long morning on the green, when we get back to the clubhouse, and I'm like, washing off the wheels of the golf cart that I may or may not have taken off-roading for, one or two holes, but I didn't know where I was going. Right, I've never been on a golf course before on the mainland. Right, in Hawaii it's different, but and then my boss, who is also just a really great advocate, right, and she came up to me and she said, so how did it go? And she just looked at me with this just fear in her eyes. Says, oh, actually, they're really cool. And two of them have kids that play volleyball. So I just gave them a couple of names and numbers and, whatever. And she's like, what? And I said, yeah, well, they were really cool guys. I mean, what territory do they cover? And she said, that would have been the CEO, the chief financial officer, and the chief marketing officer of the company. I'm like, oh my God. But I'll tell you this. Right. Again, volunteering, right. And no matter what, and I've used it myself selfishly. Like, I've had people volunteer for events that I've run, and I've actually chosen about 2 or 3 assistants from that type of experience. Right. And it has been a win, like hit it out of the ballpark every single time. But that experience for me with those 3 C-level executives, I still keep in touch with one of them, and another one was kind enough to give me a job reference, a letter of recommendation just based off of that experience alone, which is a hilarious, you got to use it with the right, with the right application. But it was really funny that, he was able to offer this up, and just thought, well, you just didn't blink twice. Did you not know who we were? I said, no, I had no clue, but it makes perfect sense. Like, I kept thinking to myself, like, these guys must be something important because they look so, distinguished or whatever. But it's, and I've done that, I've had people volunteer for events that I've run and have found some really amazing people that if I couldn't hire them, I immediately was able to find them some work, somewhere else just based on their performance. So I recommend that 1,000% for any age you are. I mean, I still volunteer at events now for companies that I'm trying to either research or be more a part of or meet certain people within. Like, I'll volunteer to do it. I don't mind, shagging balls and picking up drink cups, and I don't mind. It also allows me to see how those companies treat their staff, right? The culture from within.
Yeah. That brings me to one question I didn't ask yet, and so this was about you do a lot of things that champion rigorous safeguarding agendas. Yeah. What drove that?
Oh gosh, there's a lot that drives that. History of it in my own family with peer groups. When I was younger, and they, and really in my own sport. Like I said, I've had almost every job that there is to have, right, in volleyball, or at least have had the privilege of seeing the sport from different angles. And when you do, remind us all that, it's hard to pull the wool over your eyes. And you also come off as being a little bit like cynical, right? You come off as being like a bitter old person, which a lot of people have called me, but having seen the sport from so many different angles, unfortunately, I've also seen how there are people within our sport and others, right, that manipulate the situation, manipulate people, right, that actually hurt people in our sport. And that, to me, kind of hit a crossroads when I got to USA Volleyball. I spent some time volunteering for a group called Safe Sport International. They're based out of the UK, and they're just, I love them. I can't say enough about them because they're a fact-based organization that actually does research about safeguarding athletes and others, right? It started out as athletes, but really what we're talking about is athletes, coaches, athletic trainers, staff, the sports information directors, the volunteers, the student trainer. I mean, it's everybody, right, in the space deserves protection. And what was interesting is that Safe Sport International has this statistics, like 75% of the people that are involved in sport are going to experience some type of abuse, like physical, emotional. 75%. 75%. And some of it, you might not even be aware, right? It could be something verbal that's said to you, that could be body shaming or something else. And, more so than that, there was another statistic that at the time that I got involved with Safe Sport, it was right after I finished with USA Volleyball. And I was looking for, a different direction to channel some volunteer time. My grandpa was always big on, okay, whatever you do, however many hours you work in a day, you have to allocate X number of hours to volunteer or do something for somebody for no reason, right? That was his, his thing. And so Safe Sport has another statistic that the average victim who reports, any type of abuse, assault, or that occurred perhaps when they were in their teen years, right, 14 to 16 or so, that the average age of that person to actually come forward and finally report or acknowledge that something happened safely is 52.
Yeah.
It's that one hit me, right? Because that was about the age I was when I heard that statistic. And it was about the age that a woman that I have now become very close friends. I consider her family. And she suffered in our sport, right? She suffered abuse when she was 15 years old at the hands of her club volleyball coach, who then became her college volleyball coach, who then became her professional volleyball coach, who basically stalked her throughout her entire career, and for me, it's kind of like personal interest, right? And I had an opportunity when I was much younger to work with a club, volleyball club. So I worked with a small club, and then that got eaten up by a larger club. And that was when clubs were moving into facilities, right? Like, emptied out warehouses and all that. And I had some young women who, the club that we had been merged with was previously all male coached, right, and male directed. And then for the first time now, there were some female coaches, at least more than one, right, and even number, if not, maybe just a few more. And I had a couple of young women approach me, not sure, but feeling as if there was something not right going on, with their team. And as it turned out, one of the coaches was having inappropriate relations with one or more, of the players on that team. And at the time that it happened, there was no such word as safe sport, right? There wasn't, and even to this day,
right.
One of the things that Safe Sport International always, kind of talks about is that safeguarding really is a global problem, but it's not recognized that way globally, right? Some cultures don't think it's a problem if the girls can't play. Like, look at Afghanistan, just the Taliban, just whatever a ministry of vice and whatever has just determined that women cannot speak to women in Afghanistan. Well, how the hell are you supposed to live your life if you can't speak to more than half of your population, right? So in terms of recognizing it as a global problem, like it's not yet there, right? But it is a global epidemic of keeping people safe who are participating in activities that we encourage people to participate in order to have a more fulfilled life. Like, how ironic is that?
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
for me,
Right.
it became very personal when thinking back on, at that time that those kids came forward to me. It was like the late 80s, early 90s. And it happened over 2 clubs. And I had a hard time finding people to listen, right? Or knowing even where to go. There weren't hotlines like there are now. There weren't safe sport coordinators or even human resources or school nurses that you could go to, right? At that time, in that era, you had to have an actual crime and be bleeding from the eyes for somebody to take you seriously, right? And that's a huge problem, and when we finally found a parent that was in law enforcement, that's exactly what he told us. He goes, unfortunately, unless the victim wants to be identified, like, you couldn't even come forward confidentially, right? And that's really what killed it right there, right? Is people don't want that.
Yeah.
If you're the parent, you don't want your child to go through that at that young an age. If you're the child, like, it's embarrassing. You think it's your fault, or you're so brainwashed, right, that you don't think anything is wrong with what's going on. And so, lots of reasons. And fast forward, when I got to USA Volleyball, one of the things that landed on my plate right as soon as I was elected chair was a almost 30-year-old investigation into really, like, basically sexual misconduct, no other way around it. The long and short of it was, imagine my surprise, as somebody here's the cynical side, right? Imagine my surprise as somebody who had existed in the volleyball world and had run a couple of clubs by this time and all that I see some familiar names, in these files of this new initiative called Safe Sport, right? And USA Volleyball had been engaged in safe sport long before I came around. Like, there were people championing that cause, and thank God they did, at that time. But the U.S. Center for Safe Sport only came on board in 2017. Right. And I think, if you anybody you talk to who had been around the national governing bodies, they're like, oh yeah, for 10 years they've been saying, oh yeah, it's coming on board next year. Oh, it's coming on board next year. But finally it came online. And, what was so devastating to me is there were people my age, right, in their early 50s that were just coming to terms with things that had happened to them when they were 15 and 16 years old. Right. And I sat in a room and I listened to some of these women, that wanted to talk and have a conversation, because they felt that we had not done enough in the past, and they were right. I've sat in, in practices, like club practices, talking to kids and parents, like, hey, parents, listen to your kids. If they're coming home and they're withdrawn and they're talking about coach said this and if the coach drove them home, like let's give a little bit of sensitivity here and, like, listen to your kids. Right. So, for me, it just became personal.
Yeah. I think, as you're talking there, I'm thinking about what I see currently, just even within the club and the collegiate game, where I see so much confidence in young women. Now, I don't know if that goes, clear through in all areas, but I know I always just feel so happy to be able to see that. And, for parents, sometimes the education for them, thinking the coach is just this all being so special person. It's like they're just a person. And as you said, you have to listen to your kids. If they're telling you something, you got to listen to those kids. But it's taking so long for people to say anything. The shame of it, that's the part that's so strange. It's like they're ashamed of what happened, and they take it in.
They're worried
rather than
getting rid of it. They take it in. And really, you hear the same. It's and to be honest, like my serving on the board of trustees of Safe Sport International was very selfish of me, right? I wanted to learn more, right? My experience with USA Volleyball was not complete in my eyes. We did adjudicate a number of safe sport cases, but we also saw a number of them get shelved because the victim was shamed or stopped cooperating or, just didn't want to after all these years, all these decades. Like I just,
put it to
don't
bed.
want to put my
Leave
family
it there.
Yeah. Put it to bed, leave it there.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I think it's, what I learned through that, and again, it's, it was so helpful because it's all fact-based, right? They, Say Sport International provides so much fact-based information. It's tremendous, right? It's tremendous. It's not overwhelming, right? Because you want that at this point, you're like, just thirsting for information. And there are other organizations, the Sport Equity Lab and the Sports Ethicist, that there are other organizations now that have come up. And one that I'm particularly fond of and have a soft spot for is called the Army of Survivors. One of the founders, Grace French, was a victim of Dr. Larry Nassar and the whole, situation with gymnastics and dance and such, and has turned what could have been such an ugly, dark experience, what was, but what could have been such a limiting experience. She's turned it into this well of, knowledge. It's almost like the fountain of youth for, people that are looking to safeguard others, right? It doesn't matter if you're an athlete or, just my neighbor or, whoever. The thing is, and it's so funny, it sounds so cliche, when we normalize talking about these situations, right? It gives people license to then sort of shed that weight off of them. So I was talking on a panel once, and I, we came upon this subject, and this was shortly after I left USA Volleyball, and I made a quote, and I remember I think my successors at USA Volleyball were not too happy that I made this quote. I think they might have misunderstood it, but I basically made a quote and, saying in favor of who speaks for the victims, basically, right? If not us, then who, right? And pointing these things out that we need to have measures and protective, have a philosophy of protection, period, right? And awareness and prevention, that doesn't negate what an amazing sport volleyball is, and it doesn't pollute the waters, and it's certainly not defaming the character of those who play, right? It's defaming the character maybe of this ugly side of our sport, but really what it's doing is it's creating awareness, and it's softening the ground for someone else to tell their story, right? And a couple of weeks after I finished that panel, I got this ping on email, because I gave everybody my email, and it was a class setting, college class setting. I thought, okay, we'll give everybody the email and everything. And then I got this ping from somebody and said, well, I was at your panel discussion, and I just, you said if we had any other questions that we could reach out to you. So yeah, of course. And then she proceeded to tell me about how her college professor had been sexually molesting her, basically exploiting her, threatening, grade retaliation if she didn't keep up, these special favors and everything else. And she was worse to find out, she was a college student athlete who reported this to her athletic department. And because the professor was in a very, high profile, probably decision-making, position, right? Probably a dean of something. The athletic department was hesitant, not refusing, but hesitant, to pursue it without more proof or more whatever. And she's like, what do you want me to do? Record it? I said, well, you know what? Here's the thing. Yes, you're going to record every conversation that you have with everybody. You're going to let them know, right? We're in California. You're going to let them know. I said, and if they don't want to have the conversation with you because you're recording it, then you probably shouldn't be having that conversation. Right. Next, we're going to try to find you a lawyer and all of this. And right about the time that was happening, we were scrambling you can't do that for everybody, right? You don't have that kind of time in the day, right? To be able to do that for everybody. Right. But as she and I were scrambling, I got another phone call from a woman named Isabel Cathcart. And I always call her out because I'm so grateful to her. She's from the Foundation for Global Sport Development, and they are one of the unsung heroes, champions of funding projects, movies, resources, resource management, panels, all types of things that have to do with all sorts of sorts of areas of sport, but in particular they tell the stories that nobody wants to tell, right? And they have funded what's called the Athlete Helpline. And Isabel called me up one day and she said, "Hey, we're starting this thing, and I think you might be just the person, that would be interested in joining us, and helping us out." And I can't remember if she had seen me on a panel or we had crossed paths. We had never met. It was the thing. This was during the pandemic, right? And so we had crossed paths virtually. And I was so grateful that she thought of me, right? That first of all, that she happened into a chat room or a panel room, and was listening, but that she thought to reach out. Like, that's pretty cool. Like when I reach out all the time, but I always feel like people, find it obtrusive or, but she reached out and I was so thankful to her. The Athlete Helpline is, I've used it several times to direct young, athletes and even a coach or two. Here's where you can go to get either direct counseling, or they can help you find the resources in your area, that can help you. And they're, outside of if you're a college student, like outside of your college, if you'd rather, go to a counselor or go to a therapist that's not, associated with your college, okay, they can help. And it's really been a rewarding experience, because sometimes you go away from a safeguarding situation and it's not resolved, oftentimes. Right?
Yeah.
And you feel
right.
I feel like the dirt on the bottom of my shoe if I can't figure out a solution, right? And it's just, there isn't a solution for every problem sometimes, but wouldn't it be great if there could be, and so.
Right.
I guess that, so, it's been an area that I've delved into that I didn't have a lot of experience in before that I knew of, right? But then I look back and I think, well, as a coach, you almost do have that sort of inherent safeguarding thing about you, right? That you always wonder, okay, do you have a ride? I'm going to wait here with you until your mom comes. It's like just the little things that you do as coaches, right? That
Yes.
is inherently protective, right? Of the group that you're, if you're doing it the right way, right? And then that's what makes it so easy to spot the ones who aren't, and it's just, they're living in plain sight amongst us, and people just don't want to, they don't want to be retaliated against. They don't want to be the troublemaker. Oh, I don't want to speak up or speak out and, then be called difficult. I'm like, geez, if I get called difficult only 3 times in a day, then I'm doing something right. Right. So it's,
the helpline sounds like really an amazing addition. I thank you for all of the work and the effort that you're putting in with the safeguards, and to just help normalize some things in terms of being able to talk about it. And it's really important. Great work.
Thank you. I just wanted to say, I think the work that you're doing with your podcast, but also that the Side Out Foundation does, right? I think for us to start also normalizing, like giving proper credit where credit is due to all the organizations in our sport that remind us it's not just about sport. Right. It's not just about the win and loss column. It's not just about the, where am I going to play college ball, or where am I going to play club, or where am I going to play professional? I say this is a moment in our sport, but also in women's athletics and men's athletics. And, it's a moment. And the organizations like the Side Out Foundation, like the Foundation for Global Sport Development, like Angel City Sports, World ParaVolley. These are all organizations within our volleyball community that are serving as a reminder, but also as a vehicle, right? We're using our platforms, to drive people to the party. And I think the one thing I would leave everybody with, is as much as you invest in you or your child's opportunity to play, or if you're the college athlete right now that's, trying to navigate NIL and conference realignment and, all these other things that are going on, don't forget to leave a moment in your day for something that strikes you that is worth your time and worth your passion and worth your energy, and give a little bit of time to that. I think this is tremendous work, and I've watched over the years as the Side Out Foundation has grown and grown and grown, but this is a great example, I think, of an organization that is jumping into all areas of our sport, but reminding us that it's about more than just sport.
Thank you very much. Yes, we are very committed to the mission and love our volleyball family and advocates that support us to make the difference in people's lives. So I appreciate it. Lori, I had a great time with you here today. It's so fun to connect and to hear you share your experiences with everybody here. And I think I've learned a lot today. So I really appreciate you.
I appreciate you as well. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening. Please share your feedback with us at side-out.org.